When I think of the upper class, I think of somebody that belongs to a country club. Perhaps they drive a luxury car, they go on these crazy ski vacations, or maybe they just have 5 therapists. But the truth is that with net worth, you actually don't need as much net worth as you think you might need to become what's called upper class. In today's video, we're gonna break down all the classes and their net worth and characteristics based on US Census data and a couple of research studies. So the US Census actually gives us data on the quintiles of net worth. So what that basically means is quintiles are separated into every 20% of the population. So we have data on the bottom 20%, the 20th to 40th percentiles, the 40th to 60th percentiles, and so on. Let's start with the lowest 20%. So the median net worth in this category is $6,030 as of the most recent data in 2020, and that would put you in the poverty class. Now, $6,030 in net worth doesn't mean that you just have $6,030 in your checking account. Net worth is actually the calculation of your total assets, so everything that you own minus everything that you owe or your total liabilities. So for example, if you had $10,000 in your checking account, perhaps $40,000 in your retirement accounts, and you owned a house that was worth $500,000, your total assets in this case would be $550,000. Assume you have 2 big liabilities, so you owe $300K on your mortgage as well as $100K in student loans. That means your total liabilities in this case are $400,000. So your total net worth in this case would be $550K in assets minus $400K in liabilities, so your total net worth is $150K. Net worth is a pretty good indicator of wealth in my opinion, because while you can have a large income, if you do spend a lot of that income, then you really don't have anything to show for it. So in a way, net worth kind of accounts for spending behavior as well as discipline and financial habits, and I think it's a really good indicator of how wealthy somebody is. Now back to the lowest quintile here, the characteristics of this bucket in particular is that the average household income is between $25,000 to $27,000 per year. The census defines the poverty line in 2022 at $35,801 per year. So if you make below that, then you're considered what's called in poverty. It's highly likely that people in this group live paycheck to paycheck. They have a really hard time making ends meet, as well as the fact that if they're in a vicious cycle of debt, they're gonna have trouble climbing out of it. People in this class might be working minimum wage jobs, or they might be earning slightly above that, and few of them have even finished high school. Also, the bottom 20% might include people that just turned 18, so they're not making that amount of money yet they're still bucketed in this group. Now, if you find yourself in this class, there's nothing to be ashamed about, and in fact, throughout this video, I'm going to be sharing some frameworks and tips on how to break through the different class barriers. The next 20%, or those in the 20th to 40th percentiles, their median net worth is $43,760. This is the beginning of the middle class, and this cohort is sometimes known as what's called the lower middle class. The average income of a household in the lower middle class is right at $48,500 per year, and that's going to be slightly lower than the US median income of $70,784 per year. The lower middle class is typically made up of new graduates, blue-collar workers such as factory workers and farmers, as well as newer immigrants that are still trying to find a footing in this new country. In terms of defining characteristics for the middle class, there are 6 signs that you might be in the middle class by the Middle Class Task Force, which is a government initiative founded in 2009. They define the middle class as having 6 financial aspirations. So number 1 would be home ownership. Number 2 is owning a car, college education, retirement security, healthcare coverage, and number 6 is the ability to take a family vacation. So I find this really fascinating, which is the family vacation for the middle class has become a staple. It's the true embodiment of the fact that the middle class no longer are just focused on covering their necessities. It shows that the middle class is starting to have more discretionary income under their belt, and they're choosing how to spend that money. So it's also here where people are starting to make decisions around spending based on their wants and not necessarily just their needs. This is also where stereotypes come in. Maybe you know somebody that's spending a ton of money on their transportation, like their car payment, perhaps their shopping habit, or maybe they just go and buy those squashmallow type thingies all the time. You know that these people make a decent income, but it's nothing lavish and they're spending a lot of it. This could be a sign that they are in the lower middle class. So these are some of the characteristics of this cohort, which is that they spend a little bit too much of their discretionary income instead of investing it for their future. In order to ascend past this level, having good financial habits as well as increasing their income when they can and then saving that difference is going to be a really big key. One of the principles of wealth building is that you should always be aiming to save more of your take-home pay so that you can invest it and grow it even more later on. Another principle that you guys should be paying attention to is to actually be subscribing to my free newsletter, and that's called Hump Days. That's where we come out with 2 free articles per week on the economy, business, and news. The link will be down below for that, and if you really are enjoying what we're putting out on YouTube as a recent, you'll probably also really enjoy follow the newsletter straight to your inbox. The next quintile is what I just like to call the straight up middle class. You are literally smack dab in the middle of the entire distribution of the population. The median net worth to be in this class is $104,700, and the income of someone in the straight up middle class is very close to the US median household income of $70,000 to $71,000 a year. Usually this class is a mix of specialized blue collar workers, or they're in the beginning stages of a white collar job. They might have jobs like being a nurse, truck drivers, massage therapists, office managers, and sales reps, so on and so forth. Now, 100K in net worth or more is nothing to sniff at, and a large reason as to why these people have over $100,000 in net worth is either that they've become really good at saving a portion of their income and investing it, or sometimes it's just due to the fact that they are older. Most of the people that get to this level are already in their late 30s to early 40s by the time they cross the $100,000 mark. So if you happen to be someone that is younger and you're making a really great income of over $70,000 a year, and you're wondering, man, why am I not at $100,000 in net worth? Well, sometimes the answer is just you haven't been in the game long enough. What is really cool here is that if you have a modest income of say $70,000 or $75,000 a year, that would typically put you in the straight up middle class, but you can actually become a lot wealthier than that if you just have a long enough time horizon and you invest regularly. We've seen time and time again through news stories that oftentimes it's not how much you make, but how much you're able to invest. So there's even a famous story back a few years ago in which a janitor amassed over $8 million in net worth by the time he was 92 years old. He lived frugally, spent money only when he had to, and he even famously just cut his own firewood still when he was in his 90s. He would take his savings from his janitor job and invest that into blue chip stocks and just kind of let the power of compounding take over. While this is an extreme example, it shows that if you're able to be smart with your money, you can still amass quite a large fortune. Even if you're able to just save $100 a month from the time that you're age 25 to 65, you're gonna have a net worth of over $335,000 by the time you're 65, which will actually put you well into the upper middle class. Now, speaking of the upper middle class, the median net worth of this class is $201,800. This net worth will put you in the top 40% of households in America, and the income at this level is typically between $100,000 to $150,000 in household income per year. The data even suggests that even if you don't make between $100,000 to $150,000 per year, that you can still become what's considered upper middle class, especially by the time you're the age of 55, where the median net worth of someone at the age of 55 is $230,900. However, if we aren't talking about older folks, what does the upper middle class actually look like in terms of their jobs? The class is typically defined by white collar professionals that typically have advanced degrees, or they have certain specializations in the fields that they're in. Think about jobs like accountants, engineers, architects, and psychologists. They all fit into this upper middle class bracket. So while income is a really big defining characteristic of the upper middle class, they also have a bunch of different values compared to the lower middle class, for example. There's an emphasis on strong education for their children. They all love to do foreign travel, and they all want to be what's called cultured. The majority of people in this class, they still work a 9-to-5 corporate job. They're probably homeowners, and they probably have different types of assets they invest in, such as real estate. Even though they have this upper middle class status, it's not necessarily the case that they're all financially free. In fact, more than 48% of people earning over $100,000 per year still reported living paycheck to paycheck, which just kind of goes to show you that just because you make a higher income, it doesn't mean you know how to manage it. So that concludes the middle class, which 60% of Americans belong in. Now, if you are watching this video and you're in a different country and you're in a Western country, such as Canada, Australia, parts of Europe, we should really take a look at the global wealth perspective. In terms of global stats, I want you guys to look at this table. If you make less than $2 per day, that's considered bottom 20% in the world. If you make between $2 and $10 per day, that puts you in the next category of lower to middle income. Middle income is between $10 and $20 per day, and upper middle income is between $20 and $50 a day. High income would just be considered anybody that makes over $50 per day, and if you're somebody that does that, then you are in the top 20% of the globe. I often think that sometimes we as Americans, we forget how good that we have it, and so by earning more, yes, that's always really nice, but if we just take a look at what it looks like globally, we should realize that, hey, we already have quite a lot. I'm also gonna leave 2 links down below for you that I found interesting. One is an American middle class income calculator, and the other is a global middle class income calculator. In both of these calculators, what you do is you just input your salary as well as where you live, and it'll tell you if you're upper, lower, or middle class based on your stats that you put in. Now, as a whole, we as a human species are actually getting wealthier as the years go by. So Naval Ravikant has a really powerful take on this.
But the reality is, everyone can be rich. And we can see that by seeing that in the first world, everyone is basically richer than almost anyone who was alive 200 years ago. 200 years ago, nobody had antibiotics, nobody had cars, nobody had electricity, nobody had the iPhone. So all of these things are inventions that have made us wealthier as a species. Today, I would rather be a poor person in a first world country than be a rich person in Louis XIV's France. I'd rather be a poor person today than an aristocrat back then. And that's just because of wealth creation.
So if you're in the top quintile or the top 20% of the United States, the median net worth here is $608,900. If you have that net worth, then you are considered upper class. Now, the median household income of this group some 7 years ago was $187,000, according to a Pew Research study, but adjusted for inflation these days, that number is probably closer to $237,000 a year. According to that same study, a large share of upper class individuals, they usually live on the East Coast, for example, places like Boston, New York, and Cambridge, where there's a lot of financial and tech around, as well as the West Coast in California in high-tech areas. The area with the highest share of upper class people in the entire United States was actually the Santa Clara, San Jose County area, which is where Silicon Valley is, and I assume that's just because of so many people that work in tech and all the salaries in tech are quite high. But the upper class can also include some non-tech workers, so there are plenty of high-paying jobs that aren't in tech. For example, if you're a cardiologist, a psychiatrist, a dentist, maybe you're a senior level in the finance field or perhaps a marketing manager. What's really cool is that most people can actually get into the upper 20% just with good financial savings habits as well as investing aggressively. If we just save $200 a month from the age of 25 to 65, that's double what we had to save before, for example, but $200 a month is quite attainable. You're able to get this net worth pretty easily. People in this quintile mostly have their needs and their wants covered. They're mostly focused on things like passive income, a good retirement for their entire life, as well as their education for their kids. Now, while higher income is usually correlated to net worth, it's not always the sole driver of net worth. Oftentimes, what we see with the upper class is that there is a high amount of money saved in their retirement accounts, the equity that they own in their home, as well as different types of stock and mutual fund investments. You can see by this table that the composition of wealth by asset type in 2020 largely follows this exact pattern. This is for wealth across the United States, but it still illustrates that the path to wealth is rarely just with income, but other financial activities as well. I hope that this video helps shed some light on the different classes in the United States. If you feel comfortable sharing, please let me know what class you belong in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to my free newsletter, Hump Days, that'll be linked down below. And I'm also gonna leave my relevant video on how much money you should have saved by age on the screen right now. And I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, peace.